Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Cathy Lindsey, and I work under Astroeyes Evolutionary Astrology. And the subject I'm talking about today is the 60s part 1 and the 60s part 2 is how I kind of refer to it a lot. And basically that is the Pluto and Uranus conjunction of the mid 60s, and then the Pluto and Uranus square. And we had 7 exact squares within like a 5-year period. And when Uranus started to move into Taurus, Eris took her place. So I'll explain kind of all that. I will be looking at a few charts to show where the seeds were planted in the 60s and how it's kind of come full circle, and we're dealing with the same thing now with the same 2 planets. I started talking about what I referred to, like I said, the 60s part 1, 60s part 2, when I started noticing a lot of connections. And in the mid 60s, in 1968, I entered college. So I was kind of around in high school. I was, entered in 64. So a lot of this stuff was very much, I was a part of, or it was part of my reality at that time. And so I remembered a lot of it, made a lot of connections that way. Then I started seeing things, happening now that I would say to different people, my friends, et cetera, we started that in the 60s. Or I remember in the 60s, we did that and this, and so I was beginning to see the things growing or actually activating as we delve into some 40, 50 years later, et cetera. And to see that connection and to see how astrology and astrologically, how that all connected using the same planets. Now, they were in a conjunction in the 60s in a square, later, a little different energy, but the same 2 planets. So I started gathering some information, gathering charts. I am, very Aquarian. I have an Aquarian ascendant, and I have Jupiter-Venus conjunction in Aquarius in the 12th house. So I really resonated with a lot of what was happening back then. The dawning of the age of Aquarius, as it was called. And one thing that was very, very interesting that I noticed is the dawning of the age of Aquarius back in the mid 60s. Well, just recently, within this last month or so, we've had all of these planets entering Aquarius. And the last time that we had this many planets in Aquarius at the same time was in 1962. So another connection with the mid 60s, basically, to where we are now, even with the planets. I use orbs. And so I'm going to read some charts off that will, you'll recognize, some people will recognize the titles that go back to about 62, because there's like only 4 degrees, maybe 5 or whatever degrees between Uranus and Pluto at that time. So very activated in the orb, and a lot of activations going on before it actually, became by degree conjunct. So I'll be showing and talking about the seeds that we planted back then and how the energies were mutable back then. And very, very interesting that the seeds kind of went dormant, like about a 10-year period, say the mid 60s, give a couple years before that, to like the mid 70s, because a lot of it played, kind of finished in the mid 70s. The energy continued a little bit, even though Uranus had moved into a different sign. Finishing up is kind of what was going on. So the chart right now, the Uranus-Pluto conjunction is in Virgo, and of course that is mutable energies. And so the mutable energies are more adaptable and they're more changeable. They kind of go with the flow, kind of influenced easily. They can change to the environment around them. They kind of just what I want to say, camouflage themselves a little bit that way. So it's kind of go with the flow and a little lighter energy that way. Pluto Uranus conjunction isn't always a light energy, but the mutable makes it a little lighter, not quite as intense. And so it was very much that way back in the mid 60s. A very, very, kind of everybody, there was a lot of peace and love, and there was a lot of music. And of course, there was a lot of recreational drugs, most of them, the easier drugs, I like to call it, opposed to really harsh drugs, the majority of people. And so, so when we go to the 60s part 2, it's like those seeds that we planted in the 60s are starting to bloom, and they're continuing to grow. And things are now being put right in our face. It's not like we can kind of just flow through them and, that kind of an energy. It's like, right, it's a little harsher energy. It's right there in your face. You can't really dodge it. You've got to work with it. And that's the energy of kind of the 60s part 2. Of course, that's cardinal energy. And, cardinal energy, birthing of new, urgency, change, there's a lot more of the tearing down opposed to planting seeds. The difference between the cardinal square and the cardinal and the mutable conjunction. So when I do talk about the orbs a little bit, I do work, and you can see, I'll go through this in just a minute, that a lot was happening right before the conjunction that led up to kind of the climax of the conjunction as it continued. And so I will put those here. I'm just going to read to you just the titles of a couple of the things that were going on and give you the date as we move towards the conjunction, because it is very important to see all these activations when Pluto and Uranus were maybe 4, 3, 2, whatever degrees from each other before they actually conjunct. And so many of you remember from history, or maybe you remember, I was kind of young, I just remember it on TV at the time, with the Cuban Missile Crisis, huge crisis for the whole world actually, and that was in October 1962. 1963, President Kennedy was assassinated, November 1963. Civil Rights Act was passed, September of 1964. So that's the first time that the Blacks at that time period could actually, sit anywhere on the bus they wanted to. Of course, that was, quite an ordeal to get that actually happening, but it did. That's when it was passed, 1964. So, before that, there was no rights for the Blacks, basically. Also in May of 1964 is when guys were burning their draft cards. Anybody that remembers the 60s back then, that was quite a big protest. And it was about the Vietnam War, and they were burning their draft cards. We have Hair, the play Hair, which is quite controversial because they were naked for about 2 seconds, and then the music and everything. And that was in 1967. So that was like on the other side there. And 1968, North Vietnam Offensive, January 1968. Chicago anti-war protest, a very big one, 1968 in August. So what that does is it's just giving you an idea that even when they weren't totally conjunct, these energies were building because they were within the orb of the conjunction. And I always, when you look at the conjunction, opposite the conjunction is Chiron and Saturn. And their Saturn plays in a whole lot. Of course, that rules the government and, all over the government. So Saturn was in Pisces at that time, so a little more dreamier. but it was 6 degrees opposition. Chiron, the wound that was trying to be healed, was 2 degrees opposition. So very, very powerful chart, the moon. And at this time, we won't consider Eris because it hadn't been discovered yet, but that's where it was, up in the sky. And so I often wonder if it didn't influence a little bit because that's sitting right with the moon. So you can see the influence of the orbs as these slower conjunctions because of Pluto, the conjunction and the square as they're leading up, as planets and events lead up, and then as they move away, it's still very powerful in those orbs because those two planets are very powerful themselves. So events after the conjunction, but in the orb, I refer to, the kind of in the after effects, basically. And that's like the things that were happening around, 68, 69, a little bit into 70 and 71, the early parts of that. And I have a couple of charts I'll show you and talk about in just a second. So I want to mention that some of the main messages back in the mid 60s, early 60s, early 70s, mid-late 70s. And remember, this is a conjunction, and conjunctions can be crazy, harsh, or they can be a little easier. And I think this conjunction kind of went a little easy, a little not easy, easy and not easy. And when I say the easier part of the conjunction would be about the main, a lot of the main focus, other than the war going on in Vietnam, et cetera, was about peace. It was about love. There were a lot of gatherings and communities where they, sit around and sing and talk of peace and talk of love, music, big time, and the lyrics of some of the songs. And I remember one of them, and I was thinking of this, right, talking about this. It was called The Eve of Destruction. And I don't remember who sang it now, but I remember it was one of my 45s so even though there was a lot of love and peace and music and all the hippie kind of thing going on, one of the main songs that was very popular was The Eve of Destruction, because there was a lot of destruction going on. We had assassinations. Martin Luther King and President Kennedy and Robert Kennedy, and there was a whole lot of that type of destruction basically going on at the same time. So a lot of the lyrics of the songs were very, very loving and peace, but yet we had the ones that actually brought out the real part of it, which was like the Eve of Destruction, etc. Another saying that came out of that time period was "Make love, not war." There was a lot about the earth, loving the earth, taking care of the earth. Another saying at that time was, if it feels good, do it. So a lot of the mutable energies at that time. Another one saying, that what was going on was, all we are saying is give peace a chance. And I was active in a lot of the peace marches. And that's something we sang a lot of. Even though there was a revolution going on, we had the Vietnam War going on, we had the assassinations going on, we had the whole Watergate thing going on, there was this underlying calm, kind of this other underlying peace and love, and give peace a chance and make love, not war. So and part of that is the mutable energy that this conjunction happened in. I think I talked about that. I did mention that Eris is a prime player in everything going on now, and everything going on from the time she was discovered, which was 2005, and her energy became very prominent in about maybe halfway through 2014, and very prominent in 2015. And Eris energy, there's a lot of different areas that Eris covers. The main ones that have really, that you can see in the headlines, etc., since 2015 is chaos. Her energy is very chaotic. It's very wild card. Can't quite, say, oh, well, this is going to happen, because Eris's energy, you're not quite sure. It's a wild card energy, and it's, chaotic. It's there's a lot of jealousy, anger, and this is all on the grayer side of Eris. And in Eris, out of chaos comes creativity, of course. And there's good that comes out of it. This part of the chaos, the wild card, the discord, the jealousy, very much became prominent in 2015. That's a year out from the election when former President Trump was elected. She made herself really, really known then. Even though she was discovered in 2005, her energy became undistinguishable at that time, about 2015. So we still don't know, like, all the seeds that we are planting now, and all the ones that we've nurtured, and the ones that are growing, and what they'll develop into right now, because we're really in the process of creating the new here, and we're not quite sure what that new is. Yeah. Because of Eris, that makes it a little confusing. And but this part of world history that we're living through now is like on the other side of the exact cardinal squares, but it's where things are kind of tying up loose ends. Some things that we worked on before the last cardinal exact square and the last square part out of orb, we're kind of finishing up now. And that same kind of thing happened back in the mid 60s through like the mid 70s. So we're not quite sure exactly what all the history unfolding is, what will be happening that way. What I would like to point out is that I want to go to, this was the conjunction, and then the 60s part 1. We can take a look at the cardinal square, get an idea of that, and then I'm going to have a couple other charts come up. Okay, so when we look at this one, we see Pluto at 8 degrees Leo, 8 degrees at Capricorn, and we see Uranus at 8 degrees Aries. And so those are cardinal energy. They're very strong. They're very, urgent. They're about, all of this is really about revolution. When you're talking Pluto, you're talking Uranus. Pluto is, transformation. Uranus is that revolution part. It's about constant change. And wherever Uranus is, things are going to change. And so there's that consistency going on there. And at the time of this square, Saturn was in Libra. And I like to look at where Saturn is, like I said earlier, because it does rule the government and corporate America, etc. So a very powerful, again, and Uranus is sitting exactly with Pallas Athene, the female warrior. She used wisdom, thank goodness. Besides, and of course there sits Eris, and but she's not conjuncting at the moment anything, except she is in opposition to Saturn. So at the time of this cardinal square, we have not only Pluto and Uranus by degree, along with Pallas Athene, squaring in a very, very tight cardinal square, but we have Eris opposing Saturn, and Saturn ruling the government, and the governments all over the world. So I'm going to do some what I call full circle, where I'm going to talk about things that happened in the 60s part 1 and come back to what's happening with it now in the 60s part 1 and part 2. Okay. So if we can bring up the MLK assassination, or no, his speech, MLK assassinated. Yeah. Okay, now this was in 68, April 4th of 68. I remember this very strongly. I was a senior in high school, and it was quite a revolutionary time at that particular time. I was heading off to college. My parents were a wreck over all that. And I wasn't as much, but I realize now. And you know, when you look at this, so there's the conjunction of Pluto and Uranus. And then you look over there in Aries, and there's Saturn right with the sun and the North Node. So there's always this connection going on, it seems like, with Saturn. So looking at this association here and all that Aries energy going on, it's not surprising, you know, would bring in like the assassination. So when we go full circle, those were seeds that were planted. There was a very, you know, he gave a very powerful speech, you know, a few months before that or whatever it was, and then he became assassinated. So we bring it around full circle. So you bring it into our time period right now, and it's like the march for our lives. And the March for Our Lives was at the U.S. Capitol. And it's we got the square going on between Uranus and Pluto, only 3 degrees difference. And Saturn's in Capricorn now. So that's, you know, and it's sitting there with Mars. And so we have the March for Our Lives. The moon in Cancer is perfect for that. And so the March for Our Lives rallies were anchored at the US Capitol. But what brings it around full circle is that Martin Luther King's granddaughter spoke at this March for Our Lives. She was only 9 years old. And she told the crowd when she ended her little speech, she said, "I have a dream that enough is enough." And of course, her grandfather was "I had a dream," you know, speech that he gave. Full circle. So he was assassinated, Martin Luther King, on April 4th of 1968. And March 24th of 2018, his granddaughter gives his speech at a national, at the Capitol in a national march, basically. I mean, this one was at the Capitol, but they were all over the United States. At the same time, they were marching in New York City. Okay, so we can bring up the chart of the Beatles, Ed Sullivan. Okay, and so we had the Pluto and Uranus conjunction at that time. They're not quite conjunct, but they're within the orb. And we have Mars sitting with the Sun and Saturn, and they're all in Aquarius, and the dawning of the age of Aquarius and all that. So when we look at this, when the Beatles appeared on Ed Sullivan, February 9th of 1964, the world was never the same after that. Everything started changing. I mean, they had long hair, they played music, the girls were wild. Clothing started changing. It was shortly after, a little bit after that, when you come forward more, you know, that it took a little while, but it became okay to wear jeans and to wear slacks for girls. We didn't always have to wear, you know, skirts, and the boys were starting to let their hair grow long. It was a whole, and that's just a little bit of it. But the world was never the same after the Beatles appeared on Ed Sullivan. They ended up getting into yoga, they got into spirituality, et cetera, et cetera. So when you look at the revolution, in fact, they even sang a song about revolution, a couple of them, about being in a revolution. And they also pinned the song, you know, about peace All we are saying is give peace a chance. Okay, that song they wrote also. So when you look at this in the mid-60s with the Uranus-Pluto conjunction, and you bring it forward to the Uranus-Pluto square, that's when the March of Our Lives happened, with Martin Luther King's granddaughter. But at the same time, Paul McCartney from the Beatles marched in New York City for John Lennon because he was assassinated, by a gun. So so when you're looking at, the seeds being planted in the mid-60s with Martin Luther King getting assassinated, the Beatles appearing on Ed Sullivan, etc., you come full circle around to the square, and Martin Luther King's granddaughter speaks, and Paul McCartney marches in New York City for in honor of John Lennon. So you can see how this is like a full circle. The seeds are planted, and then they grow into the now and what's happening now. It's connected. Astrologically, they're connected. The mid-60s, into the mid-70s, and then, what we are now, the 2000s, are connected by these two planets, Uranus and Pluto. Transformation, Pluto, and Uranus, the constant of change. So I hope I explained that well enough that you understand what I'm saying. I got a couple other events that I'm also going to say so that it can bring this more in. And I'm not sure if we have charts for all these, so I will just, the March of Our Lives election. Okay, I'm going to just talk about these real quick. It's the same kind of thing. So a women's Lib Movement. Okay, back in 1968, September 7th of 1968, women were marching, and I remember this myself. We're marching for equal rights, equal pay. We were marching and talking and doing all of our little stuff so that we could wear slacks to work and not have to always wear a dress. We wanted to work outside the home also and not be penalized for it or not have to be forced to stay in the house. Also, going by MS, Ms. instead of Mrs. Are you a Miss or a Mrs.? Well, I'm a Ms. That all came about that time too. September 7th, 1968, one of the big women's Lib movements at that time that made the news was the burning of bras. The women were publicly taking their bras off or bringing their bras, lighting them on fire and burning the bras. And that was part and a real, what I want to say, it was on the news and everything, September 7th of 1968. So that was quite a movement. And then, of course, come forward to the Me Too movement, which started on October 15th of 2017. And there we're in the Cardinal Square. The seeds were planted in the mid-60s, came full circle in 2017. Another thing that has come full circle back then, and this was a nice thing, but when the Eagle landed on the moon, our first landing on the moon, man landing on the moon, July 20th, 1969. Okay, since then, and through, we've seen the probes, I guess I call them, and different space machines that have been sent up since then, and around Sirius and around Pluto, taking pictures. And I'm sure you all remember the beautiful picture of Pluto with the heart on it. And then just last week, Perseverance landed on Mars. So the beginning, and this has come, from the exact cardinal squares up to where we are now, we are still developing the seeds that were planted in the mid-60s in 1969. And I want to mention Earth Day. And I was in a march for this one also, because I was really into the earth. Back then we really honored the earth and took care of it. So the first official Earth Day, when the bill passed and it became a national day, August 22nd of 1970. But we marched forward and we had, signed petitions. We did all kinds of things. The years 68, 69, or whatever, leading up to them finally officially making it an Earth Day. So that happened in August 22nd of 1970, but we were working on that for several years before. And so, and that was another full circle. Now today, we also have climate crisis, climate change. So another full circle is we marched and did petitions for Earth Day, honoring of the earth, taking care of the earth. All of the don't litter, you get a $500 fine, all came about because of petitions I signed and a whole bunch of other people back in the mid-60s. And now full circle, we have climate change and climate crisis going on now with the Cardinal Square. And a couple other fun things. Woodstock happened August 15th, of 1969. 50 years later, August 15th, 2019. It was, in the paper and all over. Everyone was talking about the 50th anniversary of Woodstock. I didn't get to go to Woodstock, but I knew about it, of course. But it was a celebration, and it was almost a celebration of the revolution, the good part of the revolution that was going on. Aside from some of the drugs, it's very, very interesting, that with Woodstock, there was I have that written somewhere, but with Woodstock, there was 109 people that were arrested, and they were arrested on drug charges, marijuana, etc. There was no one arrested for violence or for fights or for anything like that. No arrest, period. And there was over 100,000 people gathered, listening to music, peace and love, and everybody communing together, basically. Over 100,000 people, and no arrest for violence or no arrest for anything of that nature. So that time period planted seeds. So what is that leading to now? Well, I think it's leading to a lot of what we're talking about right now, because all over the world, especially, here in the United States where I live, and all over the world, there's a lot of anger. There's a lot of division. There's a lot of hate. There's a lot of finger pointing. There's a lot of name calling. Okay, this wasn't going on back then. And so we're really talking and pushing unity, and everybody start sending out good energies, and not so much the division and the hate and the all the angst that's been going on. We got to diffuse some of that energy, like they did back in the days of Woodstock. And it was very kind of interesting too that Peter Fonda, who was very well known during the mid-60s, and he was in the movie Easy Rider, etc., died one day after the 50th anniversary of Woodstock. And he was involved in that too. So there was a lot of protests, a lot of riots in the 60s about the Vietnam War, also racial, a lot of racial tension back then, and especially since, the bill for civil rights had just passed and people were not wanting to give in to the bill. And there was a lot of disruption then. And of course, we have that same thing going on now. Black Lives Matter, etc. All of that, again, has been activated with the cardinal T-square, and it was activated back with the conjunction. So there's one other one I want to talk about, and that is that Stonewall gay riots in Greenwich Village, in New York. That was a huge deal at that time. This was in 1969, June of 1969, and it had to do with the gay rights, etc. And it was quite an ordeal. And of course, now we have a lot of the legislature and a lot of the things, laws, etc., with the LBGTs, etc., getting their rights, and what bathroom do you use, and gay marriage, and what about, all of that kind of thing has become very, very prominent now also. So again, another full circle of where all these seeds were planted back then. They kind of went dormant for a while. And then comes the cardinal square, and with Pluto and Uranus, and everything got activated again. All those seeds and all those thoughts going on the mid 60s through like the mid 70s, started growing. But with the cardinal energy, it's more of an urgency. It's more of an exact change. It's more of a it's a little more chaotic. It's a little more stressful. It's the energy isn't quite like the mutable energy. It's action energy. It's move. Let's get this going. Let's, kind of a thing. And so those seeds are having to grow whether they really want to or not. And so those of us that I consider the gifted and talented, those of us that are spiritual, it's like, how are we going to direct these seeds? And like I mentioned a few minutes ago, the collective energy out there is very divided, and there's a lot of angst, and there's a lot of anger, and there's a lot of name calling, and finger pointing. At least in the United States, there is a lot of that has to do with our elections, but I believe it's all over the world in everybody's own little situations, because of these energies. So it's like because of the energies of the Pluto Uranus square, and then when Uranus would, into Taurus, Eris was there, and for a while Eris and Uranus were sitting together, squaring Pluto, and then Uranus moved off, and now it's Eris squaring Pluto. And Eris is quite, powerful. I mean, she was involved in the Trojan War and all kinds of things, very chaotic, very, very kind of almost sneaky, kind of, and she's taken over. She's in an exact cardinal square with Pluto. And so it's kind of, I believe, very much up to us to try to diffuse a lot of this energy that's out there. Because this cardinal square energy is going to last until Pluto moves into Aquarius, which is like full time basically in January of 2024, but moves in for a few months in 2023. It'll still be like an orb close, but it'll be in Aquarius. And that's going to shift the energy into more of an air energy, which we're in now because of Jupiter and Saturn. But I mean, this is kind of like the universe has given us these next few years to get this energy diffused and make sure that it does the good that's supposed to come out of this. Where we started the shift, I call it, we started the shift in 2010. Pluto and Uranus were in orb for the conjunction. And the shift, into the new, we're co-creating the new, this new kind of world, this new collective with, more of the peace and the love and the seeds that we tried to plant back in the hippie era, but just the unity and, everybody kind of helping each other and getting along and taking care of the earth, the unity, the oneness. But we can't build that new on a crumbling foundation, which is what we really have throughout the whole world. And so it's like everything's being torn down that needs to be torn down. And basically what it is that it's all being put in our face with this cardinal square now. So we can't dodge it. We can't, we know what needs to be changed now. It's no longer behind closed doors or swept under the rug. We know what needs to be changed. And it's not easy. And we're going kicking and screaming. But we really only have a few years left to really have the power to be able to make those changes, bring that foundation down so we can build the new. And you can see that light at the end of the tunnel with Pluto moving into Aquarius, we the people, let's take care of the whole community, let's take care of everybody, the Aquarian energy. So you can see that light at the end of the tunnel. But have a knowledge of where the seeds were planted and why, and then they went dormant, and then to see how the seeds got activated again when the cardinal square came into effect and how that's still working. We're not quite all the way through it, so we don't know exactly how it's going to end or how it's going to shift over into the Aquarian energy. But you have more of an idea of the flow of this whole thing. And when you can see astrologically, it's kind of amazing that, I always call it my astrology angel or guide up there, whoever puts together all this astrology, way up there before we're ever born, has made this happen in this way with the planting of the seeds and then bringing it full course, even though we don't know exactly how it's totally going to end there yet. So these, I already talked about all these. Okay, so that's kind of that full circle that I wanted to give you some ideas, give you some knowledge of how that worked. And like I said, this is just a little bit, kind of the main ones I pulled out. There was a lot of other ones. When we had all those school shootings going on for quite a while here, over the last couple of years, the one with all the children, the kindergarten class or whatever, and then the high school ones. I can't remember all the names right now, I'm sorry. But all of that was going on. And so there was always, this kind of thing, we need to revamp some of the gun laws, war weapons don't need to be in the hands of normal people that want to hunt and protect themselves. But so, I went back to May 4th of 1970 when the 4 college students at Kent State were killed. And they were innocent. They were going to class and they were walking across campus going to class, just like Stony, whatever, okay, those 2 schools, just like they were innocently in school going to class or sitting in their classrooms. So on May 4th of 1970, the same kind of thing happened, only these guns were in the hands of military or the local, anyway, and not just somebody random. But at any rate, that's kind of where those school shootings kind of started back then. And so, I mean, there's a lot there. In 1969, when the exact conjunction was, starting to pull away, it was in the orbit, it wasn't going back and forth over the exact conjunction. We had Woodstock in 69. We had the Summer of Love going on also. And the Summer of Love was in San Francisco. And there was thousands, 100,000 people that converged on that also in the Haight-Ashbury district. And it was a social phenomenon at the time. And it was referred to on the news and everything as a revolution. And all these new age utopianism and love and music and all this stuff was plastered all over the TV between the Summer of Love, and then you had Woodstock coming up, and there was another big one, the Big Sur, which happened right after Woodstock. And so, kind of plastered all over this utopian kind of energy of the mid-60s. And as it was pulling away, it did that. Now, it did that. As it was pulling away, this was still active. Like I said, when the conjunction, when the square starts to pull away, you're still tying up loose ends. It doesn't just cut off. We're working with energy. It just doesn't cut off. And so the Big Sur, a couple of weeks after Woodstock, was known for another huge gathering of hippies and music and peace. And again, no arrest. And Joni Mitchell was a famous singer back then. And her new song at that time, which became another anthem of the times, was called Get Together. And the words were like, come on, everyone, smile on your brother. Everybody get together and try to love one another right now. And so that was another anthem from back then, along with the ones I mentioned from the Beatles, etc. So the energy, I mean, you can feel that peace and that love and that kind of utopianism, but that's what the energy was at that conjunction with the mutable signs. And, I gather that that's kind of what the universe wanted those seeds to grow and prosper in over the next, 30, 40, 50 years, until it got to the place where we could do something with it. In order to do something with it, we needed the energy of the cardinal square between Uranus and Pluto. We needed that, make it happen. We needed that energy of those two squaring each other. I mean, squaring, that's stress, that's friction. And in order to make these seeds grow and do something so that we can reach actually that peaceful utopian kind of ideas of the Beatles and peace and love everybody and let's get along. And, if you don't agree, just choose to not agree and go your separate ways. All this stuff had to be broke down. All these things that we're going through now, all these secrets and these things behind closed doors and under the rug aren't going to work in the new. You got to get rid of them all. And so that's kind of what's happening, at the moment. I wrote it. Okay. Are there any questions? Do you have any questions, Linda?
Cathy, what would you say about the violence, guns, violence that we're experiencing now in the revolutions taking place now? It started off with peace and love, but why the violence? Is that to do with the Eris and Aries?
Yes, yeah. The Aries, of course, the Aries is, war and guns and that kind of a thing it represents. So when we got the Pluto and Capricorn, and then Uranus went into Aries, and Eris is there now, the revolution part is more the Uranian and the Aries kind of energy, Eris kind of energy. So the Eris and the Uranus and Aries even expands it even more, because it is more about the guns, and it is more about war, and it is more about the conflicts on the gray side of Aries. And then you put Uranus in there with the sudden and unusual things, and that's the revolutionary energy. Really comes from the Uranus and the Aquarius, and then the transformation from the Pluto, and then you put the Pluto and the Uranus, into an agitated square, a stressful square. It's almost like, instead of saying, okay, peace and love, is kind of like, I'm just taking action, and they pull the gun out kind of a thing. And so it is activated by the Aries energy, and then the revolution part of Uranus and squaring Pluto. And squares, are stressful and friction orientated anyway. So I think that's a lot of it. And as things are so divided now, they weren't as divided back then. There was stuff going on. There was revolution going on, and songs were even written about revolution back then. But the revolution going on now is more violent. And when the riots at the Capitol on January 6th, when they took over try to take over the Capitol, etc. There was a news guy, and I don't remember who he was affiliated with, or even if he was a news guy or more of a private one. Anyway, was talking to this young lady, this lady, about what she was doing there at the Capitol, and she was so excited. And she was like, jumping up and down kind of, and couldn't stand still. And she goes, I'm in a revolution. I'm in a revolution. It's so exciting. I'm in a revolution. I remember watching that and saying to myself, do you even know what revolution you're in? Or what, it was guns, it was violence. We're going to kill all of the people in Congress. We're going to hang the vice president. This was the whole revolution kind of thing that this energy was in. And she was so excited, and all I could think of was the revolution I was in was a little more peaceful. It was a revolution. We just handled it different. But these energies are so like volatile and so quick. That's Aries. You do it now, get it over with, get it done quick, and go off and do something else. That seems to be what is happening. And I kind of think of it also as the universe is kind of really serious. We only have, till 2023, a few months there, why Pluto's still in a Capricorn, in the sign of the government and all the rules and all that, for us to get all the changes made that need to be made.
Cathy.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Could I ask you just to tilt your screen up a little bit? That's better. Now we can see you. Thank you. And do we have any other questions? Whoops. Do we have any other questions from our audience? Please go ahead if you do. Okay. This is great, Cathy. It's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So anyway, I think what you were talking about there was the fact that we're in a particular place right now with the energies, and as they continue to grow and evolve and get to the ultimate end, basically, of their mission, I'll put it that way. We do have to start trying to diffuse the energies, and again, surrounding our words, surrounding our actions, surrounding how we talk, what we say, with more of the energies of the mid-60s. Do it more in a loving way. Do it more in a peaceful way. Instead of the anger and the angst and, the division, if you don't do it my way, you're bad, or and there's so much division. It was all political there for a while now, and political, and with the virus, or you're gonna wear a mask, you're gonna get a shot, or you're gonna anything that's going on, it's all division, and people are just, they need to calm down. They need to surround their words and their actions with higher energy, with more peaceful energy, with more love energy. What we put out there, we get back. I don't want all that anger energy. I don't want that division energy. So I watch very carefully, how I say things, what I talk about, what I do, that in that way. If we start diffusing that energy, it will start catching on. Because right now we're at such a point that it's becoming really hard to exist in a world of I don't want division, and I don't want hate. I'll listen to everything you have to say. I'll honor it. Everyone has a right to their own opinion, but I don't like, the anger and the hate and the division, and you're bad because you didn't vote this way, or you're stupid because you wear a mask. All of this is doing is sending out bad energy to the collective. And people really need to understand this. And that's kind of going back to a full circle with what was being done in the mid-60s. Even though we had a lot of revolution going on, we had a lot of marches, we had a lot of we had a lot of guys, I mean, a lot of my classmates died in Vietnam, the men. And so we had a lot of bad stuff going on, but we chose to surround things with music and love and peace and community. And we're losing that right now. And so it's kind of, I think, when you can see the full circle, we can see where we came from, we planted the seeds. Now we've got the seeds in our face, so we know what needs to be changed. Now we need to go back to the more peaceful and that type of energy and the honoring of people. Everyone has their own opinion on things, and there's nothing wrong with that, you know. And so I think that's kind of something to look at here. Because it is very important. We have that job going on also, to try to diffuse all this energy. And it's really hard right now because we are still in a cardinal square, and every now and then it's a T-square, and every now and then it's a grand cross. So we have Pluto, the planet of transformation of our soul, the transformation of the soul of humanity, and you know, this transformation into that high soul part of Pluto, squaring Eris right now, was squaring Uranus, squaring Eris. And there's a reason for that. We still have to continue with the square work, you know, look at what it's bringing up, what needs to be changed, but we need to do it in a softer way. And we need to do it in a more humane way, which is part of why I think Saturn and Jupiter have gone into Aquarius now. That door is really wide open into the Aquarian energy. And Saturn will be in Aquarius for 2.5 years. When Saturn leaves, it's just a couple months when Pluto jumps into Aquarius for a few months. So Saturn kind of passes the baton to Pluto. Aquarius, community, you know, of the people. You know, let's all live together in harmony. That's part of Aquarius, besides the genius energy, the constant of change, the revolutionary. Okay, so that's where we're headed. So if you think of it that way, if we can get through these next couple of years with the square between Pluto and Eris, and we start diffusing this division energy and this hate energy, then we'll be moving right into the age of Aquarius, or a good foothold into it, you know, whatever your version is of the actual cutoff to the age of Aquarius. And the focus will be on we the people. The focus will be on community. But we need to start diffusing this energy because the collective is getting kind of out of hand a little bit, in my opinion.
Cathy, they say in evolutionary astrology that evolution can't proceed unless one deals with skip steps. So we have Neptune here squaring the nodes, and it will be for this entire year. So what message can you give us here?
Well, with the skip step and Neptune, yes, and I have talked about this. I guess I didn't today. Neptune, again, is unconditional love. Neptune is about love and connecting with, you know, of course, the higher energies. It's very creative. It's very channeling. But the main thing with what we're going through is it's about unconditional love, and that's something that we're missing right now with a lot of this. We're missing a lot of this with everything that we've gone through. I mean, you know, the 2.5 years we went through with, or the 2 years or whatever we went through with Saturn conjunct Pluto, just like in this chart here of the election of 2020, you know, and it was accented by Jupiter, which made it even more so. I mean, that's very strong energy because Saturn rules Capricorn, and then Pluto's sitting right there, and all of the, you know, the what I want to say, the angst and all that kind of stuff that went on during that time. And there sits the skip step, there sits Neptune in Pisces. Neptune rules Pisces. Whenever Neptune is in Pisces, historically, we're always going through a creative, artistic revolution, you know, and a spiritual one. And I think part of that spiritual kind of revolution that we're going through right now with Neptune going through Pisces is connecting to that higher energy. Don't get pulled into into the division energy and the hate energy and the name calling energy. Don't get pulled into that. Skip step. You've got to start surrounding and thinking through the unconditional love, through the peace part of the Neptune. Or a lot of people will end up, the grayer side of Neptune, the addictions and the mental things, if they can't get themselves stabilized. And the collective is very hard on people right now. You can step out your door and, it's like you start feeling that energy in the collective, and it's like, oh, I want to go back in the house. But I think that's what I think a lot about that Neptune, the skip step right now. Do you have any other questions? And of course, let me say this. Of course, the polarity point of Pluto is Cancer energy. Cancer is, it's an intuitive sign also, mother's intuition. But it's about, the family. It's about those that you love dearly. It's about making a comfortable home that you feel safe in. It's about stability. It's about, feeling safe. And right now, a lot of people aren't feeling real safe. And that's the polarity point of Pluto. And a lot of times when we have the cardinal T-square going on, or the cardinal grand cross, that arena exactly opposite, Pluto will be involved in it. And that's that polarity point. We need to start making our homes, our neighborhoods, our families, where we live, that kind of thing, more, sacred, or, like your sanctuary. And so a lot of people don't feel safe with it. A lot of people are afraid of different things because it's put out there in the collective a whole lot, but that's also the polarity point of Pluto. Getting back to times when you feel safer. So, and that's part of it also. And throughout these, 7 cardinal squares that we've had, over the last several years, from the exact one in 2012 and the approach to it in 2010, et cetera. There's been a lot of changes that way. A lot of also cardinal T-squares and cardinal grand crosses involving the actual polarity point of Pluto. So that's a real message also in this time of the cardinal squares with Pluto, and of course Uranus and the others, but with the polarity point of Pluto. So I wanted to touch just real fast on I don't know how much time I have, but I wanted to also the fact that the United States itself, and we're kind of at any rate, the United States itself right now is in its first Pluto return. And so the United States was founded on July 4th, 1776. So it's taken that long for Pluto to go around the chart of the United States. And we can see the revolution that's happening. We can see all the angst and everything, and all the questioning, and all of the skeletons and everything that's being drawn out of the closets and swept under the rugs. And we can see all this happening in the United States over the last several years, because Pluto moves slow. And I believe that Pluto, goodness, I have charts somewhere of the United States. And so we're only like 2-3 degrees away from, I can't find it right now. We're only a couple degrees away from exactness of the, here it is. Okay, so the natal Pluto in the chart of the United States is at 27 degrees Capricorn. Pluto's at 25 degrees Capricorn right now, so it's 2 degrees away from becoming exact. And that's a transformation of the United States. Another thing that's happening at the same time is that transiting Saturn that rules the government is at 8 degrees Aquarius. And the south node of the government of the United States is at 7 degrees Aquarius. So we have Saturn sitting on the south node of the United States at the same time Pluto is sitting on the natal Pluto of the United States. So the United States, as we know, is also in a revolution and going through some tough times. But oh yeah, and then also Uranus, transiting Uranus is squaring that south node of the United States. So we have Uranus squaring the south node of the United States. We have Saturn sitting on the south node of the United States, and we have Pluto sitting on Pluto. So that's major for the United States. It's major for the whole world. And it's part of what is happening. What's happening in the United States, kind of domino effect. It's also affecting many other countries in the world because of it being the United States. So the United States was founded during the revolution, and we're in a revolution now. So, any other questions? No?
Hi, Cathy. Doesn't seem to be any more questions, but I just want to thank you for this meeting. It's been fantastic. Yeah, any comments from our audience? Okay, any final thoughts before we wind down?
I just want to say that I think we're in very exciting times. Like I said, I believe our little part of it, is to start diffusing some of this energy just by upgrading, not upgrading, but staying in the high energy ourselves. And, I try to just, I don't know, surround everything in the higher energies, so just diffusing it. Because I think the more we can diffuse it, the faster we can get through this transformation that we're going through. And, we're in times of radical transformation. We can see that, and accelerated evolution for ourselves, our own evolution of our own souls, and also the evolution of the planet, the evolution of the United States, the evolution of humanity. And so during this time, I mean, it's all changing, it's all transforming. There's no movie where we can tell what's going to happen or how it's going to, but I do see a light at the end of the tunnel if we can diffuse some of this energy. So taking some of the stuff from the mid-60s, those seeds we planted, and we have a lot of them that are growing and making the changes that need to be made during this revolution. And I think we need to nurture a lot of the seeds that are more about the peace and the love and the music and the fun that was happening that way back in the mid-60s. And we had a lot of things going on back then too, but that is the focus. But I think that's how we diffused it a lot back then.
Okay, looks like it's time to wind down, and I'd like to thank you very much, Cathy. Hope to see you again very soon.
Okay.
And thank you from all of us. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you, Cathy.